Cheat Code Support Strategist by myheadinthecoudsnotcomingdown. Read by Brat Overlord. Chapter 6 Practical. Summary. Isuku meets with Netsu for his practical exam. Isuku gaped at Netsu, the Netsu, principal of UA, and tried not to fanboy. He failed. Oh my goodness, you're Netsu, one of the few animals with a quirk, although it's becoming more common in animals evolve alongside humans, but high specs gives you hyperintelligence, and suddenly Isuku's brain caught up with his mouth, and he realized exactly what Netsu had just said. And you caught me trying to hack UA before I even took the exam. He really was an idiot, just like Kachan had said, wasn't he? He was going to get kicked out of UA before he even got accepted just because he'd gotten bored and decided to do something stupid. Of course, Power Loader wasn't leading him to the practical exam. He was taking him to the principal, who was going to press charges, and then he'd get a permanent mark on his record, and nowhere else would ever accept him, and I'll leave him to you, then. Good luck, Power Loader said. As he turned his back to leave, Izuku could have sworn he muttered something about the end of the world, but honestly, he was just too scared of what was about to happen to pay much attention. He swallowed thickly and looked at the principal, who was still grinning at him. Maybe he was just waiting for Izuku to apologize? Well, apologizing couldn't make things worse, at least. Izuku lowered himself into a deep bow. I'm so sorry, Principal Netsu, sir. What I did was completely uncalled for and inappropriate, and I wasn't thinking clearly, and obviously that's no excuse, but...
Oh, there's no need for that, Midoriya, Netsu chirped. In fact, what you did was quite impressive.
Izuku straightened up in shock. The principal's expression was hard to read on account of the fact that his face was not human, but he couldn't exactly see any anger or malice. What? You're not mad?
Oh, no.
Netsu stepped aside and gestured for Izuku to come in.
In fact, I was quite delighted. It's not often that people are brave enough to try, so it's quite fun to test my defenses against new faces. Tea?
Izuku nodded numbly and sat in the chair Netsu offered him. He still couldn't believe that he wasn't in trouble, but apparently Mei had been right about him being a good first impression. Or maybe Netsu was just getting his hopes up to crush them later. It wouldn't be the first time. Netsu carefully poured the tea and set a cup down in front of Izuku.
So, how long have you been hacking?
I think about 8 months. Izuku took the cup and held it while he waited for it to cool. I only picked it up after I decided to apply for the support course. I thought it would be useful for information gathering.
Oh, I agree completely,
Netsu chirped and took a sip of his tea.
But I am surprised that you're still new to it, considering your creativity this morning. Was applying to the support a recent decision?
I had thought that hero support was just inventing stuff. I didn't think to look into the analysis track until, sorry, I'll stop rambling. But, well, since I really enjoy analyzing heroes and quirks, it just seemed perfect, I guess. Netsu smiled knowingly.
It's not often that we get young people applying to be analysts. Most people assume that support is simply invention of support items, just like you did. And while analysis is an important part in the creation of those support items, many people overlook its potential in strategy and intelligence gathering. Speaking of your analysis, may I see your portfolio?
Izuku nodded and dug the notebook out of his backpack to hand to Netsu, who eagerly started leafing through it. Izuku wondered if he was just skimming his writing or if his quirk really gave him the ability to read that fast. If it was the latter, then how fast could he read? Was the speed limited by the quirk, or could he train himself to read even faster? If he wasn't limited by his brain, then his speed could probably be limited by how fast he could physically turn the pages. But if he was reading something that scrolled automatically like a computer, how fast would that affect the speed of his reading?
Well, I'm not as fast as all that, Midoriya-kun,
Netsu chuckled.
I still have to wait for my brain to catch up before I can turn the page, and while my quirk definitely helps, most of my speed reading is actually a skill I've cultivated.
Izuku flushed red and slammed his mouth shut. Sorry, I know my muttering is creepy.
On the contrary, it was a wonderful demonstration of your real-time analysis skills, Netsu said simply, turning back to the portfolio. And while it will most likely be useful to learn to be aware of when you are muttering, there is nothing inherently wrong about the habit. Izuku's eyes widened, and he stared at Netsu silently while he finished the portfolio. His muttering wasn't bad? That just seemed so weird to him. Kachan had always said that it was annoying and creepy, but then again, he'd said the same things about Izuku's notebooks. Maybe it was creepy if a hero did it, but was simply eccentric when an analyst did? That would make sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, an eccentricity, not an annoying habit that he had to get rid of. Izuku liked that. Netsu finally turned the final page of his portfolio and set it aside. This is quite impressive. I'm assuming that you've been analyzing heroes for much longer than you've been hacking? Yes, sir. I started analyzing heroes as a hobby when I was 4. I just didn't realize it was a marketable skill. Would it be all right if I head on to this so that I can peruse it more thoroughly at a later date? Netsu asked. Izuku nodded, a weird sense of pride growing in his chest the more the principal praised him. I had already assumed that I wasn't going to be getting it back since it's part of my application. Excellent! Netsu clapped his paws together. Now, you have your laptop with you, correct? Yes. Izuku dug out his laptop and set it on the desk in front of him. Perfect, Netsu said. Now into the practical portion of your exam. Izuku swallowed nervously, thinking of all the ominous good luck wishes from Midnight and Powerloader. What will I be doing exactly? As I said, I was very impressed with your efforts this morning, so I simply want you to continue what you were doing then. Netsu's eyes twinkled with mischief. I want you to hack into UA. Izuku blinked away tears of exhaustion and frustration as he limped away from UA. Sore from sitting hunched over his laptop for the past few hours, he tried everything he could think of, every back door, every little trick, even a hastily made virus, but by the end of the exam, Izuku had barely made it past the first round of defenses. It didn't matter how much Netsu had enjoyed his portfolio, or how well he'd done on the written exam, he completely failed the practical. What was his mom going to think? After all these months of her going out of her way to support him, would they grow apart again? Would she be disappointed in him? Where was he going to go to school? What job would even take a stupid, weak, quirkless nobody like him? Suddenly, Izuku was rammed into by somebody going full speed. Immediately, he froze and curled in on himself to try and make himself a smaller target. Kachan couldn't still be here, could he? Netsu had left some time during Izuku's exam to go monitor the Hero Course practical, and Izuku had tried to use that time to hack UA using Netsu's computer, but couldn't even crack the password. But Netsu had come back pretty quickly, so Kachan should already be on his way home by now. What if it was someone else who had learned that he was quirkless and was going to beat him up and they'd never find his body and... Oh, whoa, Izuku, are you okay? What's wrong? Izuku jolted from his spiraling thoughts and looked around, but the only person near him was Mei, who currently had one hand resting on his shoulder. Oh, Mei running into him was actually completely in character, probably. It was just Mei, not Kachan, and Mei wasn't anything like Kachan, so she wasn't going to beat him up. Probably. Izuku forced a smile onto his face. Nothing, you just startled me, is all. Mei frowned like she didn't believe him. Then what's with the tears? He tried, he really did, but he only lasted about 2 seconds before those stupid Midoriya tears were running down his face like some sort of a stupid geyser. He hadn't even known that this girl a full day, and now he'd ruined their friendship for their partnership or whatever it was because he was himself and he was crying in front of her and he just couldn't stop. Mei had started rubbing his shoulder sometime during his breakdown and was probably trying to be comforting, but her muttering about unleashing her babies on whoever had hurt him was actually pretty intimidating. No one hurt me, Mei-chan. Izuku finally got out between tears. It's my own fault, anyways. Mei looked at him skeptically. Then what happened? That set off the tears again, but thankfully he could speak through them this time. Netsu wanted me to try and hack UA for my practical, but I couldn't do it, and I failed. Oh. May sat down on the sidewalk and pulled him down next to her, ignoring the weird looks from people passing by. Are you sure they didn't just want you to try? That made Izuku pause. What? Well, every failure is just a stepping stone to success, right? May said excitedly. And you said yourself that UA cybersecurity was absolutely insane, so what if he was planning on you failing? Izuku just stared at her. If he wanted me to fail, then why'd he tell me to succeed? May flicked him on the forehead, which was apparently her way of getting him out of his head and telling him that he was being an idiot. A lot of inventions are just about learning the process. Even if they don't work, they still weren't a waste of time because they help you make a next invention even faster. UA security wouldn't be the best in the business if a first year could ramp through it, right? They probably just wanted to see how you approach the problem that you couldn't solve. They wanted to see your process. Izuku thought about that for a moment. It made a certain kind of sense, but then again, everything May said seemed to toe a line between being reasonable and being absolutely insane. So maybe it was just that she was saying something that made it sound so believable. Still, it might make waiting for his rejection letter a little less painful, just so long as he was careful to not get his hopes too high. If you say so, he said slowly. But what about you? How'd your practical go? May grinned and immediately launched into a story that involved blowing up her workspace 3 times until she finally got a working prototype of a hover boots 20 minutes before the end of the exam. Izuku listened and laughed with her until his tears dried, and Mom finally frantically texted him, wondering when he was going to be getting home. By the time he started walking home, his heart was a little lighter than it had been, and his phone was a little heavier. It had a new number in it, after all.